All right, folks, let's rewind the clock for a second and really set the stage here. If you've been following U.S. politics, you know that for the past few years, Trump has been on a mission to change how America deals with trade, especially with China. It's one of the cornerstones of his entire economic policy. Make America's industry stronger by bringing jobs back home, and of course, protecting American workers. Sound like a good plan? Well, Trump thought so. But here's where things get a little tricky. He introduced tariffs, big, bold tariffs on everything from steel to electronics, you name it. What's a tariff, you ask? It's a tax on imports. So, for example, if China sends steel into the U.S. slaps a tax on that steel, making it more expensive. It's like saying, hey, China, if you want to sell your stuff here, you're going to pay a little more. The goal? Put pressure on China and other countries to stop dumping cheap goods into the U.S. market and to level the playing field for American businesses. In theory, this is supposed to give American-made products a competitive edge. If you have to pay more for foreign steel, the idea is that you'll be more likely to buy the American-made steel. It sounds good, right? And it definitely played well with Trump's base. This was all about standing up for American workers and industries and taking a tough stance on China. But, and this is where it gets interesting, tariffs aren't as simple as they look. Let me break it down. Tariffs sound great when you say, we're going to make foreign companies pay to do business here. But tariffs are essentially taxes on imports. That means the cost goes up, and guess who ends up paying those costs? Yep, you guessed it, American consumers and businesses. So, while Trump thought he was putting the pressure on China, American companies that rely on imported materials or goods suddenly found themselves paying more. And those costs don't just disappear. Guess who ends up paying for it in the end? You and me, the consumers. Take electronics, for example. Have you checked the price of smartphones lately? Thanks to tariffs, those prices went up. So did the cost of things like washing machines, cars, and even some food items. And while Trump supporters claimed these tariffs were a way to make American industries stronger, many critics pointed out that it was just shifting the burden to American shoppers. Here's the catch. Tariffs aren't just about taxes. They also mess with global supply chains. Most businesses don't make everything themselves anymore. They rely on parts and materials from all over the world. Tariffs disrupted those supply chains, leading to delays and higher prices across the board. So, while Trump's team was celebrating a win for American workers, the reality on the ground looked a lot more complicated. But now, here comes the real twist. Enter the U.S. Appeals Court. These guys, they hold some serious power. They're the ones who step in when laws or policies get challenged, especially those that have the potential to shake up the entire economy. And in this case, well, they just ruled that Trump's tariffs on foreign goods were actually illegal. Yep, you heard that right. Illegal. Now, don't get too caught up in the legal jargon just yet. Stick with me here, because this is where it gets really interesting. The court didn't just say no to the tariffs. They challenged the way they were implemented, and trust me, the reasons why they ruled this way could change everything we thought we knew about these trade policies. So what happened? Why did the court rule this way? And what's the fallout going to look like? Buckle up, because this is just the beginning. We're about to dive into why the court took this dramatic step and how it might just alter the entire course of Trump's trade war with China. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss what happens next. Okay, now this is where the plot really thickens. Forget about the politics for a second, because the real drama happens inside the courtroom, where lawyers, not politicians, call the shots. And let me tell you, what went down here isn't just about the tariffs themselves. It's about the method behind them. See, there's a little thing called the Constitution, and according to it, when it comes to tariffs, this is critical. Congress needs to be involved. Yep, you heard that right. Tariffs aren't just some decision that can be made on a whim by the president. The law says that Congress is supposed to have a say in this. It's part of the whole checks and balances thing the Founding Fathers built into the system to prevent one branch of government from running wild. Now, here's the kicker. Trump didn't really involve Congress in the way he should have. In fact, he pretty much went around them. Whoops. He used a loophole, a legal gray area that allowed him to impose tariffs. But here's where things go south. The court didn't see that as a minor oversight. It was a major legal misstep. Picture this. You're in court, and the judge looks over all the evidence and says, "Hold up, you can't just slap tariffs on foreign goods without going to the right channels." It's kind of like trying to change the rules of a game halfway through, except this game impacts millions of people and billions of dollars. The court wasn't having any of it. They said, "You can't make such sweeping decisions without Congress being involved in the process." Now, let's be real here. This wasn't just about some technical detail. This was a big deal. The court was essentially calling out the administration for skipping a crucial step. Imagine if any business tried to make a huge change, say, a price hike on a product, without asking the board of directors first. People would lose their minds. Well, that's exactly what happened here. Trump's team tried to make this major policy change without following the proper steps, and the court wasn't going to let that slide. But here's where the stakes get even higher. The court didn't just say, "Hey, try again." They said, "This is illegal. You can't just impose tariffs without Congress's approval." That's not just a slap on the wrist. That's a major ruling that could shake up U.S. trade policy as a whole. Why does this matter? Well, if Trump can impose tariffs however he wants, it opens up a Pandora's box. You can have one president after another, each making their own unilateral decisions that throw entire industries into chaos. There's no stability, no predictability in the market. Business owners, importers, and even consumers need certainty to plan and invest. Without proper legal procedure, that certainty evaporates. So, the court wasn't just protecting the law. It was protecting the economy and ensuring that major decisions affecting the country don't get made without proper oversight. This kind of chaos is the last thing we need, especially when global relations are on the line. If one country can just put tariffs on another, it creates all sorts of confusion and hostility on the global stage. In a way, this ruling wasn't just a win for the legal system. It was a win for stability. It's about ensuring that big decisions, especially trade decisions that affect the whole country, go through the right process. The court wasn't going to let Trump's tariffs stand without the proper oversight. They gave a clear message. You can't just go around doing things your way, buddy. So, now that we know the court's ruling was a big legal deal, let's talk about what it means for you and me, the regular folks, the ones who head to the store, pay our bills, and look at our bank accounts after a trip to the supermarket. Yeah, those people. How does this ruling actually impact our daily lives? Here's the truth. These tariffs have cost Americans billions of dollars. Billions. You can almost think of it as a sneaky tax that everyone had to pay without really being asked. You might not have seen it on your tax return, but trust me, it's there, hidden in the prices of things you buy. When you put tariffs on foreign goods, it doesn't just affect importers and big businesses. It affects all of us. Whether it's your new phone, a pair of jeans, or even that bag of chips you grabbed at the grocery store, tariffs make everything more expensive. That's because companies importing goods now have to pay more to bring them in. And guess who ends up paying for that price hike? Yep, you. Let's put this into perspective. You know how that new phone you've been eyeing is getting more expensive every year? Blame the tariffs. Tariffs on electronics from places like China meant that companies who imported those products had to pay a higher price. And when they pay higher prices, you can bet those extra costs trickle down to you. The same goes for clothes, cars, food, you name it. Prices creep up and leave you with a heavier wallet, especially when wages aren't keeping pace with all these rising costs. So, if these tariffs are ruled illegal and lifted, well, imagine this: cheaper goods. Yep, that means your next trip to the store might feel a little less painful, and those prices might go down. Who doesn't love the sound of that, right? I'm talking cheaper electronics, more affordable clothes, and potentially even lower grocery bills. It could be a win for everyday consumers like you and me. But hold on, before you get too excited, there's a catch. Because here's the thing. If this ruling sticks, it could completely upend the whole trade war strategy that Trump put in place with China. Remember that whole America First thing? The idea behind all these tariffs was that it would force China and other countries to play fair, to stop dumping cheap goods on the U.S. market, and to make deals that favor the U.S. more. It's kind of like going into a high-stakes poker game, betting big on tariffs, and hoping the other side folds. The goal? To get better trade deals that benefited American businesses and workers. But now, with the tariffs being ruled illegal, the U.S. might have to rethink its entire strategy. If Trump's big bet is off the table, that means the U.S. might have to go back to the drawing board and figure out a new way to handle trade relations with China. And that's not just a small tweak. This could lead to a complete shift in the way we do business with China and other countries. For one, the U.S. might need to look at other tools to use in negotiations, or even come up with entirely new ways to hold foreign companies accountable. Maybe it means returning to trade talks, or maybe it'll shift the U.S. focus to other issues, like intellectual property or unfair labor practices. Either way, it's clear that this ruling could force a major reevaluation of how the U.S. interacts with the rest of the world in terms of trade. That's a pretty big deal when you're talking about global markets, business relationships, and all the moving parts of the international economy. And here's another thing to consider. What happens to the global economy if the U.S. can't play the tariff game anymore? Well, if America stops using tariffs as leverage, other countries, especially China, might feel less pressure to make changes to their trade practices. So this could ultimately lead to a new kind of stalemate in global trade. And if you thought tariffs were causing chaos, just wait until countries start rethinking how they're going to engage in these international trade talks. But don't forget about the positives. On the consumer side, lifting the tariffs could mean lower costs for you, the average shopper, and a bit more breathing room for businesses. And we all know how tight things can get when prices are constantly rising. So it's not all doom and gloom, folks. There are wins and losses to be had, depending on how this plays out. One thing's for sure, the legal drama surrounding these tariffs is far from over, and it's definitely going to keep us all on our toes. Okay, folks, here comes a plot twist. And believe me, it's a big one. Now, you might be thinking, all right, the court ruled it's over, right? Well, not quite. This isn't the end of the story. Not by a long shot. You see, the Trump administration is not just going to roll over and accept this decision. No way. The fight isn't over yet. In fact, they're already planning to appeal this ruling. So buckle up, because we might be in for a legal battle that could drag on for months or even years. Yeah, you heard me right. This case could go all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. Imagine the drama of a case that has the potential to shape the future of international trade for decades, playing out in front of the highest court in the land. If this thing gets appealed all the way up there, you can bet it's going to be a long ride, full of legal maneuvers, debates, and maybe even more surprises. So while today's court ruling is a win for those who oppose Trump's tariffs, don't start popping the champagne just yet. It's far from the final chapter. And here's the kicker. If these tariffs do eventually get repealed, like if the appeals go through and they end up losing again, there's a huge ripple effect. I'm talking about a massive disruption in global trade relations. Think about it. The world has already been navigating a complex web of trade deals for years now, with countries jockeying for power and influence. And here comes this court ruling. Like someone just threw a grenade right in the middle of the whole thing. Everything we thought we knew about how countries interact economically, it could change overnight. You see, the tariffs were meant to be more than just a tax on imports. They were part of Trump's strategy to force China and other countries into renegotiating trade terms that would benefit the U.S. more. That's what the entire trade war was about, using tariffs as a bargaining chip to get better deals. But if these tariffs are repealed, well, then what? Will the U.S. just throw in the towel and go back to the negotiating table? Will they try to make deals without that heavy tariff hammer hanging over China's head? Or will China see this as a sign of weakness and just keep doing their own thing without making any concessions? It's like a game of chess where the pieces keep moving and nobody knows what the next move is going to be. And let's not forget the other countries involved. If the U.S. backs down on tariffs, how will they react? What about the European Union, Japan, or even smaller nations like Vietnam and Mexico? They've all been impacted by this trade war, and now they'll be watching to see how the U.S. responds. If tariffs get lifted, some countries might feel emboldened to start pushing their own agendas, and that could create even more uncertainty in the international markets. But here's where it gets even trickier. Nobody really knows how it's going to shake out. I mean, think about it. One day you're working on a deal, and then the rules change halfway through. Suddenly, everything you build up could come crashing down. That's exactly what could happen in the world of international trade. The Trump administration's entire economic strategy has been about shaking up the global order, challenging trade norms, and using tariffs to force other countries into line. But now, if the U.S. is no longer able to use tariffs as leverage, will we see a new approach to diplomacy? Will the U.S. go back to old-school negotiations? Or is the world on the verge of a whole new kind of trade relationship? We just don't know yet. And that's what makes the situation so exciting, but also so unpredictable. So, while the court ruling is a huge development, the real question is, what's next? Will Trump's administration bounce back with a new strategy? Will the global economy shift dramatically? Only time will tell, and you can bet we'll all be watching closely to see what happens next. So, after all this drama, what's next? Are tariffs totally over now? Well, that depends on what happens in the next few months. And trust me, things are about to get even more intense. This case, far from over. It's like we're in the middle of a legal thriller with plot twists still coming our way. Here's the deal. Trump's team has already made it clear they're planning to appeal the ruling. And we're not just talking about appealing to another regular court. Oh no, they could take this all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. Imagine that. The highest court in the land deciding whether or not the Trump administration can continue using tariffs as a trade weapon. That would be a legal showdown for the ages. Think about it. The Supreme Court has the final say on the most important and controversial legal issues in the country. So, if this goes up to them, it's going to be a huge moment for American trade policy. Imagine all the back and forth, the amicus briefs. Those are legal arguments from interested parties. The high-powered lawyers and advocates, all taking their shots at this one giant case. The stakes would be enormous, both for the U.S. economy and for global trade. But let's not get ahead of ourselves just yet. Even if this case does make it all the way to the Supreme Court, there's no guarantee that Trump's team will win. In fact, the legal precedent here is pretty clear. The tariffs weren't implemented the right way. The court ruled that Trump skipped a step by bypassing Congress, and that's a major problem. So, even if this case drags on, there's a strong chance the ruling could stand. And if it does, the tariffs would likely be repealed, and that could change the entire landscape of U.S. trade policy. But, and this is where things get really interesting, what happens if the tariffs get repealed? Well, the immediate impact could be a sigh of relief for American consumers. If the tariffs are lifted, goods that were once more expensive, like electronics, clothes, and even food, could drop in price. Who doesn't love a sale, right? But hold up, this isn't just about cheaper shopping carts. Repealing tariffs could have far-reaching consequences on U.S. trade strategy and foreign relations. Would Trump throw in the towel and return to the negotiating table with China? Maybe. Or maybe he's got a new strategy in the works, one that doesn't rely on tariffs at all. We could see a shift in how the U.S. approaches its trade talks. More diplomacy, perhaps, or even more pressure on China and other nations. The U.S. might try using different tactics to secure better deals, like trade agreements, economic incentives, or even creating new industries that can thrive without needing tariffs to survive. But here's the real kicker. Whether or not you agree with the tariffs, this is a huge moment in American trade policy. We're talking about the future of how the U.S. interacts with the rest of the world. Will we continue to use tariffs as a weapon, or will we find new ways to negotiate and build trade deals? This could mark a major turning point in the history of U.S. trade. And hey, I know this issue has sparked tons of debate. Some folks are all about the tariffs, thinking it's the only way to stand up to China and other countries that play hardball. Others argue that it's just hurting everyday Americans who are paying the price. So, now it's your turn. What do you think is going to happen next? Will the tariffs get repealed? Or is Trump going to come back with a brand new trade strategy? I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on all of this. It's been a wild ride so far, and I know there's a lot more to come. Drop your thoughts in the comment below, and let's talk about this crazy twist-filled story. If you enjoyed this video, Don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe.